Friday, and thanks for tuning in to radiofreerhinecliff.org. In this show in particular, correct me if I'm Norm. I'm your host, Norm. I'm thrilled to be here tonight with Gerry Protheroe. Protheroe. Did I say it right?
Yeah, you certainly did.
I did? Close enough, or actually right?
Very close.
Very close.
I'm delighted to be here on Norm's show.
Yeah, I'm delighted to have you. So if you had to give me a grade for how I pronounce your surname, what kind of grade would I get?
I would give you a B+ on that, I think.
Oh, that's okay. That's sort of in keeping with my entire academic career.
Okay.
And I asked for a grade because you've been sort of an academic most of your adult life, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I was a teacher both in England and in the United States. I was a head of department in 4 American schools when I came over in 1985. So I've had a broad experience of education, teaching, and grading people.
Yeah, I'll bet. And so what did you teach when you were in England?
Well, I was a history lecturer in a college in Richmond upon Thames in London.
Mm-hmm.
And there were kids who were doing A-levels, which is the equivalent of things like advanced placement.
Right.
And I was teaching those courses to those guys who were wanting to go to university. And I decided in 1985 that my soccer career, which was very important to me, was coming to a close, and that I needed to do something really different. So I managed to get a job in America, and here I am.
Wow. Well, tell me about your footy career.
Well, I played lots of soccer from a very early age, and I played for the university sides that I attended, and a little bit semi-pro, but mostly really, really good amateur standard.
Uh-huh.
So I was very committed to that, and I really wanted to be a professional soccer player. That was my goal, but unfortunately, 'twas not to be. It's a very difficult job to get.
Yeah, nearly impossible. I imagine most of the kids you grew up with sort of had that fantasy.
Well, part of the problem was we were in a rugby-playing nation back in
Wales.
And, for example, the grammar school I went to, they didn't do much soccer, so we got enticed into rugby. And I didn't like rugby, although I was in the rugby team, but I much preferred the soccer because I was much better at that. But there was a bit of a class thing about the grammar schools in Wales. Grammar schools did rugby, and grammar school kids were rugby players, and they didn't approve of soccer much, so there was less chance of opportunities to develop it there, you know.
So was soccer for the higher class kids or lower class?
Soccer was for the sort of the deadbeats, really,
Uh-huh.
because the grammar schools were full of, well, I mean, I went to a working class grammar school of kids who were likely to get into university, but whose parents had never gone anywhere near a university.
Right.
Well, that's where we were.
And you were born and raised in some unpronounceable town in Wales, I'm guessing?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Wales, and I was born in a little town called Dowlais, which is in a bigger town called Merthyr Tydfil. And in 1851, Merthyr Tydfil was the great iron town of the world, was the biggest iron industrial production town. In fact, they had 4 iron masters who were multimillionaires. So there was an enormous industrial heritage to the town I was brought up in. But of course, in the 1950s, that industrial heritage was declining, if not even non-existent, because the mines were closing and the ironworks were shutting down and the steel works were closing. So it was a different ballgame, but growing up in that environment.
And why were they all closing down?
Well, basically because their day had gone. I mean, they weren't. For a start, they weren't located on the coast, and most steelworks were to be found in coastal areas, and so the cost of carrying steel down to the coasts was too much for the companies to bear. So they kind of went out of business, and coal mining was becoming very unproductive. And of course, there were a lot of coal mining disasters. And I was unfortunate enough to be a witness of one of them, which was the Aberfan disaster in 1966, which, if you've seen The Crown, is done exceedingly well in The Crown, of when coal tips fell down on the schools in the small mining village of Aberfan, which is 3 miles away from where I was living, killed 165 children and a number of teachers.
Wait, you said coal tips fell down?
Coal tips fell down. When they dug out the coal, they sort of had to put the slag, the stuff that was left over, somewhere, so they put it high up on the mountainside. And
Gotcha.
all of South Wales was covered in coal tips. And the problem with Aberfan was in 1966, they'd had a lot of rain, lots of rain, and they didn't know it, but there was a stream under the tip, which had been there always, but with the amount of rain that fell, suddenly the coal became slurry. And one morning in October 1966, as the kids were lining up in school to sing All Things Bright and Beautiful, the tips came down and completely destroyed the school, killing over 165 children and many adults in the school, including somebody I knew really well, a man called Stanley Bynan, and he was found in his classroom with holding on to 3 children who had all died. And, it became a national and international disaster. The Crown does it very, very well. And for Queen Elizabeth, it was an embarrassment, because for a week she didn't respond to calls to visit Aberfan until her advisors told her, you need to go there and you need to show empathy with the people in that environment.
All right. Well, you're a historian, so I can ask you this. What the hell was she thinking? Why wouldn't she go there right away?
Well, as she once famously put it, and the Crown quoted, we don't do disasters.
What do you think about that as, as governmental policy?
With every respect to the monarchy, sometimes they do well. When King Charles came over to deal with President Trump, I thought he did a wonderful job. And at times they don't do a good job, which was when Princess Diana died, and in the case of the Aberfan disaster, they didn't respond well to it. So, it's a kind of mixed thing as to how they're going to respond to various events.
And it seems there's always debates whether there even should be a royal family, and it should be a monarchy. What do you think about that?
Well, I wasn't madly keen on them, although I did get presented to Prince Charles, as he then was, when he came to Oxford to open a new building, because I was captain of the soccer team and they wanted somebody from the soccer team to be presented to him. So I met him in the library and we shook hands and had I think a glass of sherry together, and I was with about 7 or 8 other people. But my feeling about the monarchy is that based on King Charles's excellent visit to smooth over the problems with President Trump, I think the kind of soft diplomacy that he showed was really excellent, and we really needed it, because the Prime Minister had made such a mess of it, you couldn't believe it.
Right.
When he'd come over and got himself in a total mess with Donald there.
Oh, yeah. Let me just back up here. I'm not sure I heard right. You said something about the problems with President Trump, as if there are any?
Well, I mean, Britain sort of prides itself on its special relationship.
Yeah.
And President Trump makes a lot of his relationship with Scotland through his own family. But at the end of the day, the great question is, in the event of an international crisis in Europe, what would President Trump do? Well, it would appear that he would not, at present, support his NATO allies, who would have to sort it out for themselves. Unfortunately, that's the image that he has created in my mind.
And in many minds, both here and abroad. Yeah.
Yeah, well, indeed.
It's foreign policy seems to be fuck you all, more or less, unless you can fight with us against certain enemies.
Well, to give him to say something for him, I think he was right about the NATO contribution to their military budgets. I think that's a very fair point. But at the end of the day, I don't think that President Trump had any understanding of what the NATO alliance stood for, which was a kind of collective security arrangement which had worked tremendously well since 1949 and would work if it had the belief of the American president behind it. But in the current president, I think there isn't that belief.
Yeah. All right, and now we need a cocktail. After all this talk about the current president,
cocktail, definitely.
And you brought something in for us. What did you bring? Would you do the honors?
Well, I brought in some Manhattans because if I can just explain about Manhattan, I really thought that was the most wonderful thing that America had produced. When I arrived in 1985, I knew very little about America at all. And
oh boy, he's pouring it out. It looks delicious.
And
there's cherries too.
Yes,
one for Matt.
Cherries we've got, and so I thought this is a wonderful thing that America has, the cocktail. Because in England, cocktails were associated with the upper classes. The sort of hooray Henrys and hooray Henriettas.
What does that mean, hooray Henry?
Oh, hello, Henry. Oh, hello, Henrietta. How are you? You're sort of an upper class Green Welly Brigade.
The frightfully keen and jolly set.
Exactly. And we've dubbed them the hooray Henrys and the hooray Henriettas. Oh, hello, Ponsonby. What are you doing tonight? Oh, cocktails at my house and all that sort of thing.
Huh. Well, yeah. So I need to cop that kind of accent for cocktails at my house. So let me just an aside here. Are you very interested in etymology as a historian?
Yes. Well, tell me, what do you think etymology is?
Well, like, where did hooray Henry come from? What was the first usage of that?
Well, I mean, basically, it's a response, I think, by people from a Welsh working class background to the perception that England is dominated by a sort of upper class caste of privileged characters. And I mean, for example, we've got Welsh rarebit. Now, that is not a Welsh dish at all. It was called in the 18th century Welsh rabbit because English people believed Welsh people didn't eat red meat because they were too poor. So, in other words, it was Welsh rabbit that they ate. And so we have this dish called Welsh rarebit, but it's not really a Welsh dish at all. And it was really
it is cheese, right?
Yeah, it's a cheese thing. But, I mean, it was really a slur thrown out by the English to the fact that we weren't eating red meat in the 18th, early 18th century.
And do you eat red meat now?
Oh, yes.
Here's to it.
I like my red meat.
Here's to the Welsh really pulling themselves up by their bootstraps.
Thank you.
Oh, that is delicious. Thank you so much.
Very nice.
So growing up in Wales, did you feel that? Did you feel that in the UK that the Welsh were sort of a lower class or were looked down upon?
That was definitely a sort of chip on the shoulder. And what was really good about my school was that as a grammar school, they were very interested in getting people into Oxford and Cambridge. And I arrived there just as that was going on, and I was lucky enough to get a place at Jesus College, Oxford. So I'm, in fact, a Jesus man, or, to give it its posh term, a Jebusite.
Oh, a Jebusite. Never heard that.
Oh, well, this...
And was Jesus College known for something in particular?
Well, Jesus College was founded in 1571 by a bunch of Welsh gentry who went to Queen Elizabeth I, who was half Welsh herself, and said, we need a college in Oxford for the Welsh. And so they set up Jesus College in 1571. Now, the interesting thing about this is that there are certain colleges that you can apply to in Oxford where if you're from a Welsh working class background, you may as well forget it. You're not going to get into Christchurch, you're not going to get into Magdalen, but you are going to get into Jesus. And sometimes some upper class hooray Henrys get into Jesus because they haven't got into Christchurch or to Magdalen.
Right.
And so, for example, I remember meeting Rupert Chastel de Bonville on the first morning I arrived in Jesus, and a fine fellow he was as well.
Yeah. And you say the Hooray Henrys. Were Hooray Henriettas welcome to matriculate at that point in time as well?
Well, it wasn't co-ed, but the Hooray Henriettas were in the women's colleges, which were about 5 or 6 of them. Somerville, where Margaret Thatcher went, for example, and there were other ones, St. Hugh's and St. Hilda's. And really it was kind of a rather odd, a rather monastic kind of existence at Oxford University. It wasn't co-ed at all in the colleges.
But there were women's colleges next door or down the street or whatever.
Down the street, there were women's colleges.
And where would you go outside of the college? I mean, there's a regular, proper high street and, side streets and stuff. Where would you go to meet the Hooray Henriettas?
Oh, well, the King's Arms, which was opposite the Sheldonian Theatre, was a place where the Hoorays were certainly gathering. And there was the White Horse Tavern and various other hostelries where, there was a lot of drinking going on at Oxford because if you live in a single-sex college, what are you going to do?
Well, I guess go ahead and try to meet some Henriettas.
Well, that yes, and that was rather difficult since most of them were privately educated and you were from the state schools. I remember playing for...
Again, another sort of like class distinction.
Very class distinction. I went to play a match against Malvern College, and my whole team that I went with were from state grammar schools in the north of England, like Queen Elizabeth Grammar School, Blackburn. And we went in and had lunch with these people in Malvern College, and they had all their sports cars outside. The parents were, wanting to see Oxford University playing their school team.
Yeah.
Well, we beat them 4-0, but the problem was we had a couple of people sent off. So, in fact, the Oxford University wasn't looking so good.
Sent off red cards or
red cards in the match because things got a bit out of hand with, and of course Oxford University wasn't meant to represent that kind of thing. So it was a jolly bad show, sir.
And were you a dirty player?
Oh no, I was a skillful ball player and sort of goal creator.
Oh,
was
good.
My job.
Well, that's good. So so many questions. I know in London, for example, there's sort of a posh accent and the Cockney accent and stuff. And in England in general, there's so many different accents. Birmingham accent, the Geordie accent. Yeah. In Wales, are there different accents? And can you sort of tell where people are from?
Well, we if you're going to apply to Oxford University from Wales, you really have to do some speech training to go to the interviews because the sort of way working class Wales operates, it's very difficult to understand what people are actually saying sometimes. And so what one does is to sort of spruce oneself up a little bit in terms of verbal dexterity.
It's the Pygmalion, the My Fair Lady.
Absolutely. That is a very good analogy.
And your parents, were they from Wales as well?
Yeah, my father was living in this town, Merthyr Tydfil, and my mother was as well. And my mother had been in London during the war, and my father was in the British Army in the Second World War, and got as far as Hertogenbosch in Belgium in 1944 when he was blown up in a Bren gun carrier, but he wasn't killed, but he was out of the war at that point.
Good fortune. Bad fortune, good fortune.
Good. Well, my mother and father were divorced when I was a youngster, so I didn't see all that much of him, so I'll make no comment about that.
So that was fairly rare back in the day as well, divorce. No?
No, I think there was a lot going on. I mean, in the 1950s, there'd been much more emancipated in attitude,
and back to the accent. Your folks, what did your dad do there in Wales? Merthyr Tydfil.
Well, that's a good. Well, he sang in a band, in fact, and he was a sort of a manual steel worker. Working really in sort of working class jobs. Jobs were difficult because of the 1930s. Wales was hammered in the 1930s.
Yeah.
Unemployment rate was through the roof. The great hero in Wales was the great American singer and actor Paul Robeson, who has a lot of documents in Swansea University in Wales because he spent a lot of time helping Welsh miners in particular who were unemployed in the 1930s. He was over in England and performing and was a great star. And he became a hero of the sort of Welsh working class movement, Paul Robeson. And of course, he did have those connotations with the Soviet Union, etc., which cost him dearly when he returned to the United States. But he wasn't a communist, but he got caught up in the McCarthyite.
Red Scare is happening again here right now, isn't it? Like the Trump administration accusing people of being communists.
Well, he's got to find something to
midterms coming up fast and furious. So your dad was a singer, musician, played in a band, and also a steel worker.
Yeah.
Which sounds like the kind of trade that really amplifies an accent. Did he have a really serious Welsh accent?
Yeah. He did have a serious Welsh accent, and all of the people in South Wales. In fact, if you were going to apply to Oxford University, it's almost like you had to do a sort of elocution course,
right,
in order to convince them that you were not, some peasant from the backwaters.
Do you remember any sentences in your elocution course? I mean, the famous one being the rain in Spain.
Well, I didn't do the rain in Spain, but I did do a BBC interview about the Welshness of Jesus College, because a lot of Welsh kids went there, and a lot of my friends, when I got back, said, "Whoa, well, that was the accent. We could hear the accent." In other words, an English anglicized accent, they did not like it.
Well, your friends from Wales.
Yeah, they thought I
look, Gerry,
sold out,
all posh. And
sold out to the English establishment. There could be no worse crime than that, I can assure you.
And so were they teasing you good-naturedly, or were they a little bit betrayed?
Well, one or two of them, weren't too happy, and there was a sort of... there was a sense that they weren't very happy about it.
Right.
But you can't, if you're going to go to a university like that, you can't speak the way you were brought up as. It's not possible, and it doesn't help you.
Right. Can you do your original accent?
Well, I don't know what. I mean, it's been a tough job coming here to America. I mean, what's going on here? I don't know, with this bloke Trump.
All right. Now, can you do your father's accent?
Well, that's pretty much the way he spoke.
Okay. And were there siblings?
No, we had one parent family. I was brought up by my mother, but I did have a big extended family because my mother had 3 sisters who were married, successfully married, whereas her marriage had broken down with my father. So that was kind of not so good.
Right. And did you have any idea why your parents split up?
Oh, well, I think because my father was a Lothario, and he
It's a solid reason.
and
Time tested.
And Merthyr was a small town. I mean, there were only 60,000 people there, and so scandal, it would get around very quickly.
I'll bet.
And
I'm a Lothario.
he was a Lothario character. I mean, he was a lead singer in a band, and so he felt that he was, I don't know, Bing Crosby or somebody.
Bing Crosby. Were there famous Welsh singers?
Well, there's a big choral tradition, so there are a lot of male voice choirs, and we've got Bryn Tairfel at the moment, who spends a lot of time in America singing opera in New York. Tom Jones is one of ours.
Right.
Bonnie Tyler is one of ours, or at least
wow.
She passed away the other day.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big choral tradition in Wales of male voice choirs in particular. So that's quite a big deal.
And were you ever musically inclined?
Well, I played the guitar and stuff, but I didn't go the male voice choir route. I thought that was a bit too kind of conservative for me, really. It's but the Welsh choirs are renowned as and they have this amazing festival called the Eisteddfod, which takes place every year, which literally means in Welsh sitting down, but Eistedd means to sit down in Welsh. But basically, it's a global enterprise now, because the Eisteddfod is attended by people from all over the world, and it's a very highly regarded cultural event and goes on in different towns in Wales every year.
In your school growing up, was English the prime language, or did
Yeah,
people
because we
instruct
were in
Welsh?
South Wales, the big industrial area, so we were totally anglicized. But I learned Welsh at school, and basically I was doing French and Welsh, and what they did was they said at the age of 13 you have to make a choice between Welsh and French. Well, in the 1960s, all the kids who were in grammar schools chose French, because we were trying to get into the European, what was then called the Common Market, the European Union. And so they thought Welsh was a sort of anachronism, that nobody spoke it anymore, and what did it matter anyway? And so they all chose French and didn't do any more Welsh. But that has been completely reversed in the last 30 years.
Oh, that's nice.
And because of the emergence of a Welsh government, a devolved government in Wales that has devolved powers from the English Parliament or the British Parliament, and the current Welsh First Minister is the head of Plaid Cymru, which is the Welsh nationalist movement, and they're very keen on Welsh speaking, and a very laudable thing that is as well.
Huh. And if this Welsh nationalist movement got their way, what would change, if anything?
Well, the Welsh nationalists are a little bit ambivalent in their attitudes towards Europe. In the referendum on the membership of the EU, Wales voted overwhelmingly against being in the EU. But the Welsh Nationalist Party would like to have an independent Wales in the EU. And that's and at the moment they are the Welsh government in Cardiff is kind of like New York State government within a federal framework, and so this Welsh government has only just been elected, and their leader is a very bright man indeed, and he wants what's on his agenda is independence for Wales, and he wants it now.
And the population of Wales is sympathetic to this?
Well, they've just sort of voted. The problem is that Brexit has caused an enormous furore in Britain, and it's upset normal voting patterns, and basically Plaid Cymru are trying to stand as a party that would go back into Europe, because that's the only way they could possibly survive as an independent Wales if they were in the European Union, kind of like Moldavia or somebody like that.
Right. And what is the number one economic power of Wales right now?
Well, that's a great question, because I think Wales has suffered badly as a result of Brexit, and Britain as a whole has suffered badly as a result of Brexit. There's no doubt that the economy is not as really strengthening as much as it was, and that's because Brexit has been a complete failure. But it's almost impossible to talk to Brexiteers and say to them, leaving the European Union was the worst thing you could have done. Why would you leave an organization with 480 million people, which is a market for your economy?
Right. And if you leave, it no longer is.
Yeah, well, if you leave,
Right.
you've now got to go hand in glove to ask people to make trade deals. And when we asked Obama to make a trade deal, he said, well, you're going to have to go at the end of the queue, I'm afraid.
You gads.
So that was unfortunate.
Right. But you're a U.S. citizen now?
I am a dual citizen. I've got U.S. and British citizenship.
So where do you vote? Can you
I
vote?
vote in the United States.
Right.
And I can vote by proxy in Great Britain.
Interesting. Huh. So you have two votes.
I have dual citizenship, a
Right.
bit like Melania Trump has dual citizenship.
I was not aware of that.
But she's a Slovenian
Right.
citizen.
Yeah, I was aware of that.
American.
Yeah. Huh. He gads. Yeah, I don't think you ought to be able to vote twice. No matter.
Well, yeah, different circumstances, but I mean, I think it's good. I mean, I think it's, well, what's good is that, there's a bill in the American Senate that wants really an end to dual citizenship. It's a bill put forward by Bernard Moreno, who's the senator for Ohio. And, of course, it hasn't got anywhere at the moment. And I would think Melania Trump would be totally opposed to it.
She doesn't
So
always.
she might be our best card.
Oh, yeah. She doesn't always behave in the logical way.
Well, her
in terms
son
of these
Baron
things.
is also a dual citizen
Yeah.
of Slovenia and the United States.
Yeah, lots of people looking for their dual citizenship these days. More and more people I know are like, oh, well, my great-grandpa was Italian. We're going to see if we can get that going on.
It's a great thing to have dual citizenship. I mean, but I mean, there are lots of Italians who are dual citizens. I mean, there are great communities in the United States with lots of dual citizens who
Yeah.
are very angry with Bernard Moreno, the senator for Columbia. For Ohio, who's from Columbia originally.
Oh, boy. And you have a kid, a 17-year-old kid, right? And does your kid have dual citizenship?
My daughter had a triple citizenship at one point.
Oh, boy.
Because she was born in China. She's adopted. So she was a Chinese citizen until her passport expired, which did after 5 years. But she holds American and British citizenship.
And would it have been possible for her to hang on to that Chinese passport?
No.
Okay. Because China says no. 5 years
China
gone,
says no.
you're out.
You're out.
It seems reasonable enough, I guess.
At the time, they I'm not, now they're so desperate for girls because basically all the adoptees were girls, and now they're faced with this enormous crisis,
A girl
where
shortage.
there are no girls for all these boys.
It sounds like a beach movie from the 50s in the
The
US.
one-child policy
Yeah.
sort of, floundered, and they abandoned it under Xi Jinping, which was probably wise. But now you've got all these young Chinese men looking for Chinese girls, and there aren't enough of them.
Aren't any. Oh my goodness. So your daughter's mom, I'm guessing that's your wife, is she from Wales as well?
No, she's from Buffalo, New York,
Oh my goodness.
which is kind of a bit like the town in Wales that I came from. Kind of a little bit of a town that's regarded as a little bit of a on a losing streak, if I can put it that way.
Right. They're doing okay in football, aren't they?
Well, they're doing okay in football, but generally speaking, Buffalo has a feeling that its greatest days have passed.
Yeah, lots of these sort of post-industrial towns have
Right.
that feeling.
Right.
And it's hard. They can't all be brought back in with
Right.
like cute coffee shops and cheap artists housing.
Exactly. So, but I love Buffalo. I love going there. I think it's a great place. I love to watch the Buffalo Bills, and I've had terrible tragedies watching 3 Super Bowls go out the window in the 1990s.
Right.
But it's good. It's I like going to Buffalo. I think it's a great place to go to live.
Yeah.
And it's cool.
And do you have to say that because you have in-laws there right now listening in?
Probably, maybe.
And how did you meet your wife? What's her name?
Paula
Paula.
Marie Protheroe. Well, I met her
Protheroe.
at a party that was given by the J.P. Morgan Bank that in Manhattan, and we got in. This was in 1989, and we got engaged very quickly. And my mother-in-law said to me, "Well, tell me, is this really a marriage or is this a green card marriage?" And she's still asking me that last Christmas.
Still asking you this, 36 years later.
Are you still in this for
36
the
years
green
and
card?
one kid. So I'm guessing it wasn't for a green card. And so what was the meeting like? You saw her across the room, your eyes met, and
Yeah, it was a bit like that. It was a great party. I mean, J.P. Morgan staff has great parties in pubs in New York City, and we were living in New York City, and I went with a friend of mine. I was invited to go, and my wife was there, and of course, I made a beeline for her and tried the best I could to make her think that I was a serious contender, as they say.
do you remember your opening line?
My opening line. I think it was. I can't remember what the opening line was on that one, I'm afraid.
Yeah. And so you were a teacher at the time.
Yeah.
Where were you teaching?
I was teaching at the Anglo-American International School, which was on West 86th Street in Manhattan, and is now the Dwight School.
Okay. And how long had you been in New York City?
I was there. At that point, I'd been there for 5 years.
Oh, okay. And did you come over to work at the Anglo School?
I did on a 3-year visa. So perhaps I'd better not say any more about this in case.
Well, certainly this school took care of that after 3 years.
They did, and I had applied for a green card, but you were supposed to have left the country. And I had a green card application in, but then I met my wife, and that speeded up a little bit.
And what about her? Did she must have wondered, along with her mom, whether this was just a marriage of sort of legal convenience?
Well, my wife didn't, but my mother-in-law certainly did.
Right, because your wife felt the realness of love.
I hope so.
Well, 36 years, if my math was right, That's pretty good. Hats off to you.
I hope so. I hope it's pretty good.
What are your secrets for a successful, long relationship?
I think you have. I think you have to find the right person, and it was surprising to me that I found the right person, who was really from a totally different cultural milieu than I was from. So that was kind of interesting.
And what kind of cultural milieu was she from up there in Buffalo?
Well, I sort of. Well, she was in a far better economic position than I had been back in Merthyr Tydfil in South Wales. I can tell you that. But I think there was a feeling that, well, I don't know. Buffalo did have a lot going for it, and the Peace Bridge was open, and there was a lot of trade going across from Canada, and that had really sort of, the North American Free Trade Treaty had really helped Buffalo a lot to recover from its sort of industrial, post-industrial malaise.
Right. Huh. And do you visit Buffalo often, you and the missus?
Yeah, I love going up there. I love going to the Eagle House in Williamsville.
What is that?
Well, it's one of the oldest pubs in Buffalo.
Oh.
It's so good in there. It's just great fun to go there and have a Manhattan and, watch the television and watch the Buffalo Bills. Of course, how many conversations about Mr. Allen, the quarterback, can you actually put up with? Well, I'd put up with many.
Yeah. Have you always been a sports fan? Did you grow up a sports fan?
Oh yeah. I mean, I was huge in sports fan in Britain.
Who was your soccer team?
Well, I was a big Manchester United supporter.
Okay.
And
that's not so close to where you grew up, is it?
No. But I was really taken by the Munich air disaster in 1958, which killed a lot of this great young team known as the Busby Babes. And the team was top of the league, and it was in the FA Cup final, the equivalent of the Super Bowl. And half its team were dead. Oh. I mean, more than half its team were dead. And so they had to get new players in. And there was a young man in there called Bobby Charlton, who became one of the greatest players England's ever produced, winning the World Cup in '66. And he was only about 18, 19. He was in the Munich air disaster, but survived okay. They signed a lot of players quickly, but they lost the league that year, and they lost the great Super Bowl FA Cup thing because they just couldn't replace these players so quickly. And it would be one of the great disasters, the Munich air disaster of February 1957.
And what was it? I'm not...
Well, the plane tried to take off in icy conditions and failed on a number of occasions. They kept trying to get up in the air to fly from Munich to either London or Manchester, and the plane just crashed on the runway, and very many people were killed. The manager was badly injured. Their top player was a young man called Duncan Edwards, who was only about 19 and could have been one of the greatest players the world has ever seen, soccer-wise. And he just passed away a few days later in a Munich hospital. It's a great, great tragedy. I was only 7 at the time. I was so upset that I became a lifelong Manchester United supporter.
Right. Well, that's sweet. What a wonderful story.
Yeah.
Now, you have all the names and all the dates and all the details, and I want to ask about your life as a historian. Have you always been interested in history?
Yeah, I think history can teach you a lot of things, and I think, I was very good at history at school. I really liked it. I really like writing, and I've written a book, and I've written a number of articles that have been published, and I work at New York University, and I've worked with New York University since 2001 as a part-time professor there, and I've had great experiences teaching at NYU. And now that I'm retired from my full-time job as a head of department in a school. I just do my NYU stuff, and I get great people on my courses. I had a man called Mr. Esterhazy, who worked for the New York Times as a sports reporter on my class, and a number of other people who were, quite big in the news, media, business, doing the course at NYU that I teach, which is a course on international politics from 1990 to the present.
Oof.
It's called The Crisis of Security, Global Politics from the End of the Cold War to the present. And it's a story about how we went from a great position of strength to a relatively insecure position of strength.
Right now.
Right now.
Yeah, I think I've witnessed a lot of that. It's not.
We have.
It's not a very joyful story if you're an American.
No, I mean, I think the turning point for me, I think, was 9/11, and the fact that we never really recovered from 9/11 had enormous long-term consequences. For example, it took us into a war in Iraq that we should never have gone into. On the afternoon of the day after 9/11, Donald Rumsfeld wrote a memorandum to the President of the United States in which he said, we should try to see if Saddam Hussein has played a role in this. In 9/11, Saddam Hussein had played no role in 9/11. But the day after, there was a big line of people who were willing to make that connection.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's really hard to say, but I think the neocons were, the neoconservatives in the Republican Party were on a roll. They had dominated the 1990s. They could not believe that a bunch of Arabs living under a tree in a desert could have planned an operation like 9/11.
Huh. But you don't think oil had a lot to do with it? I mean, Saddam Hussein was sitting on top of like vast reserves.
Well, yeah, yes, that may well have been a motive with regard to it, but I think there was an idea that basically, that what was needed here was to exert American power as much as possible,
right? Because
it was a unipolar system.
Yeah.
At that point, the United States was preeminent, and China had not risen, and Putin's Russia was in the doldrums. And so the bottom line is that, they decided to exercise this power, which in retrospect, but I understand why they did it, but in retrospect, they may have thought that some of these forever wars were going to be a problem.
Right. Now, over the last 40, 50 years, what efforts to assert American power do you think have been more or less successful for America?
Well, I think Reagan, for all his blemishes, was a very effective president in the Cold War. I think that he forged a relationship with Mikhail Gorbachev, which was very productive and was followed up by George W. Bush, and that the Cold War came to an end in a way which we could never have imagined would have happened. The Soviet Union collapsed. There were no wars accompanying its collapse. And the bottom line was, it was a tremendous moment of triumph for America, which they tried to avoid sounding triumphalist, although the neocons did have a triumphalist sort of demeanor to them. And I think that it was America's world from 1990 to year 2000.
Do you think it ever will be again?
No, I think we're not in a great position at the moment, and things have got very difficult on the international scene.
Do you see other countries in the ascendant on this account?
Well, I think China is obviously an enormous competitor
Yeah.
for the United States, but I think the United States can forge a relationship with China, and I think Trump thinks that he can do that, and that would be a very good thing. He thought he could forge a relationship with Putin in Russia, but I'm not sure that that's worked out really, really well for him. And now he's kind of oohing and ahhing about the Ukraine war. But I have to say, and I hesitate to say this because it might put me in his bad books, I think the Iran thing is a major error on his part, and I don't know how he got in it, and I don't know how he's going to get out of it.
Right. Well, you can't really speculate as to how he got in it without being very insulting to the man and his
Yes.
intellect.
Indeed, I won't go down that road. But
No.
how to get out of this now that he's in it is really, I think, going to take years.
Yeah. And what do you think the end game is for all of that, for Trump and his cronies?
Well, I think it's a very dangerous time. I don't know what the end time would be, but I think it's a very worrying time for everybody. I think Trump has alienated many of his allies. I think his allies are disunited. I think America is strong when its allies are with it, and its allies are strong when America is with it. I think when you have a breakdown in that relationship, you have a real problem. And I don't think that, I think Trump thinks that he can go it alone with American power. And,
Always.
that's the way it is. And I think he thinks that Europe needs to take care of its own business, and he'll take care of other business. Well, he took care of Venezuela, I suppose, but he didn't. But he's got himself in a difficult situation.
Not making friends, yeah. So you wrote a lot about the Vietnam era, in particular this guy Roger Hillsman.
Oh, yes.
When you think about how our government, the U.S. government, was behaving during that era and how it's behaving now, especially with regards to Iran, do you see any lessons that we're not learning from?
Well, I mean, the thing about Roger Hillsman was that I knew him personally. He was the Assistant Secretary of State for Far East in the Kennedy administration. He was on excellent terms with John F. Kennedy because he'd fought as a guerrilla fighter behind the Japanese lines in Burma in the Second World War. He was a counterinsurgency expert, and so what he said was that you don't want to escalate the Vietnam War by putting in ground troops. You need to build a counterinsurgency model to deal with South Vietnam, and Kennedy was very interested in that. The problem was when Kennedy was assassinated, Roger Hillsman was the first person in the administration to be fired by Lyndon Johnson, because Lyndon Johnson did not like the counterinsurgency approach. In fact, he didn't know anything about it. He wanted to unleash the B-52s. That was his solution to the Vietnam War, unleash the B-52s.
Are they mutually exclusive?
Well, I mean, the B-52s meant that you were going to rely on air power, and counterinsurgency was the strategic Hamlets program they had in South Vietnam,
Right.
which was to create sort of areas of South Vietnam which could defend themselves against the Viet Cong, and which you won over the hearts and minds of South Vietnamese people to winning the war on their behalf. And I think that was Hillsman's strategy had worked very well against the Japanese in the Second World War, and he was the principal counterinsurgency expert in Kennedy's administration. And Kennedy loved him, and Roger loved Kennedy. He had, so Kennedy's death was a disaster for Roger Hillsman.
Right. Now, there was some thought, or at least a claim amongst the current administration, that the Iranian people would create their own counterinsurgency force and help topple that government.
Right.
What do you think about that? I mean, it doesn't seem to have come to pass.
It doesn't work. It hasn't worked. And I think that this particular regime in Iran is not willing to give up power, and has demonstrated its autocracy by executing people from cranes, etc. in Tehran, and that has really frightened the people. It may be that Trump should have acted a little earlier if he was going to act, but if he's going to act at all, he needs to mount a ground invasion. His problem is he hasn't got anywhere to mount a ground invasion from.
Right. Oh.
I think I need another Manhattan.
Absolutely another Manhattan. I'm going to light it up now by asking you. Recently retired from the Browning School, a posh private school, as we say in the U.S., on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Mm-hmm. And so you're teaching there. You're teaching kids who were the opposite of what you were as a youngster. Mm-hmm. Did you feel culture shock sort of every day being in that place?
No, not really. I think the fact that you come in as a British person to an American school, and if you know what you're doing and you've got good stories, that kids will really respond to it really well. And I have to say that I'd never taught in an all-boys school till I arrived in Browning in 1996. I taught in South Carolina, and I taught in 2 schools in Manhattan before that. But I really kind of enjoyed the Browning school. It wasn't easy dealing with boys. Boys are not easy to deal with, but it was great. It was really, really good. And I was there for 25 years. I really enjoyed working there.
And they seemed to really enjoy having you.
It appears so. Yeah. They did give me a couple of awards as well, which was very nice.
And glowing retirement text.
Well, yes, indeed. But
amongst it was how good you are at impersonating Winston Churchill.
Oh, yeah. Well,
I wonder if you'd grace us with a little Winston Churchill right now.
Well, Winston Churchill's great speech is in 1938 at the time of the Munich conference. And really, Neville Chamberlain has sold Czechoslovakia down the river to Hitler. And in the House of Commons, of course, Chamberlain is feted by his supporters and by almost everybody as a savior of peace in the world. And Churchill rises and he makes a speech which begins with the immortal words, "All is over. Czechoslovakia recedes into the darkness." And of course, I can't remember the rest of it, but it was a wonderful speech by Churchill in which he said this isn't going to work.
Right.
And that Chamberlain's a fool, and Churchill was a member of his own party for having said this. So it's one of the great Churchillian moments, I think.
Love that. And you've been one of the great correct me if I'm wrong moments. Thank you so much for being here. We're out of time.
Well,
it's crazy how
the time has gone really fast.
Gone by.
And I hope we haven't injected enough humor, perhaps, too much politicking.
I had fun.
Oh, well, I had fun.
Apart from some politicking. Anyway, Gerry Protheroe, did I get it right that time? Still a B+. Thank you so much for being here. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. Have a fabulous Friday evening and a great weekend. Thanks to producer extraordinaire Matt Rosenberg and the Epicurean. We're outside right now. There's some sort of fundraiser with hot dogs. So if you hear my voice, come on down, get a hot dog and a beer, and support the library, I think.
Firehouse.
The Firehouse. Gerry, thanks again for being here. Matt, you're the best. Patricia, thanks for having us here at the Epicurean.
Thank you.
Good night.